Hey, welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back.
Another live session. Are you ready for this? I see tons of people in the chat here already. As we get started off and launch off into this session, how many of you enjoyed the free garden pest cheat sheet that we shared with you earlier as a little sign-on bonus? Let us know in the chat. I know a bunch of you got that. If you didn't get it, we can get you the link for that. But yes, this session is going to be talking about insect pests and controlling them. And we have special guest Brian Lowell coming very soon that we will introduce. But just before we do that, we are going to do another giveaway. And this time we are going to give away our entire gardening cheat sheets bundle package. And so we have a whole bunch of other gardening cheat sheets. We have a winter gardening cheat sheet that goes into all different steps on how to grow the timing for winter crops, how to protect your winter crops, which crops to grow in the winter. We have a cheat sheet. Well, here, while I'm telling you about this, you should be putting something in the chat here. So let me type the word. What should they type this time? Let's go back for win. Super easy. Okay. So I'll type the word win in the chat. And we have a cheat sheet with garden immune boosters. So natural fertilizers and stuff like that we have used in the garden or that we suggest. And we have another cheat sheet on vegetable families. There's just a whole bunch of different ones, and you get all of our current and future cheat sheets. So it's kind of like the all access pass forever for our cheat sheet bundle. So someone will win it, and I'm going to share the screen here. Are you ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the winner is dun, 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 Cynthia.
Cynthia Miller.
Cynthia Miller, congratulations for winning our Ultimate Garden Cheat Sheet Bundle. Please email support@seedtime.us to claim your gardening cheat sheet bundle that you just won. Congratulations. All right. Now, a quick little shout out to our sponsor for today. Our sponsor for today is Earth Medicine. And Dad, what is one of your favorite things about Earth Medicine?
Well, it's biology. It's an all-natural,
in a very small packaged form.
In a small packaged form, it's pelleted, so you can transport it, you can store it easily. No issues with temperature.
One of the things that I think that's cool about it is that it's pelleted, but when most people think of pelleted, they think of a machine that just boom, 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 like pelleted it.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's literally just rolled into pellets in the way that it naturally becomes what it is, which is kind of crazy. So anyways, we're going to share a short little video. If you missed the session with Earth Medicine, which was the one right before this one, people were pretty excited about it because they just sold out of all of their 7-pound bags that were listed on our website. And they do have some of the 5 pounds, but if you want some, you can get 10% off.
I was not expecting the level of interest that people showed. So.
Yeah. So we'll play a short little video of them, and then we'll be right back. you'd like to check that out, there's a link down on this page where you can go over to the Seed Time store and grab one of those. Otherwise, now we are going to introduce our guest speaker, Brian Lowell. And we are very excited to have Brian with us today. He's going to be sharing with us about pest management, insect pest management, especially in the context of companion planting. And Brian's probably best known for his YouTube channel. It's got a very large YouTube following with Next Level Gardening, and it's just absolutely fantastic. I'm going to pull Brian on here. Brian, welcome.
Welcome.
Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, we're very excited to hear from you. And we're going to drop back into the background here in just a second, but just want to encourage everyone in the chat, feel free to ask questions as we go along. We will be starring those. We'll come back for a short Q&A. And yeah, we'll be here. Give a shout out, Brian, if you need us for anything, but we're going to transition it over to you. How's that sound?
Sounds good. Now, I'm a gardener, not a technically wonderful person. So I think to start the PowerPoint, I push present, right?
Yes. Yeah. Push present. And then you can share. Do you have it set up where you could just share your screen off of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And once you share your screen, we can push it up there as well. While Brian is pulling those up, let us know in the chat, what insects have you guys struggled with the most in your garden? Is it squash bugs, Japanese beetles, cabbage worms? Let us know in the chat which ones are the ones that, oh man, I see questions. Also, I was going to mention earlier, Brian is one of the presenters in the School of Traditional Skills. So if you haven't had a chance to watch that session, you'll definitely want to go back, watch that session as well with Josh Thomas. And he has a whole course on companion planting in the School of Traditional Skills, which is pretty awesome.
All right, I'm about there. I had to go through. Maybe I'm using a different browser than we used testing this out.
Oh yeah, I got to go through all the permission settings and stuff like that.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries at all. If you do have to restart the browser, that's fine as well. Just let us know and we can.
Yeah, let me restart in a different browser.
Okay, sure.
I'll just go back to the one I used before.
Yeah, no worries.
Give me a second.
We'll see you in a second. All right, I see a lot of people in here saying cabbage worms, grubs, cabbage moths, squash beetles, stink bugs, aphids, white flies. Dad, what would you say would be what do you think is the worst insect pest that we've ever had?
We had some really bad infestations of Japanese beetles early on and squash bugs early on, but they disappeared, and we haven't really seen them since. I remember also having a couple of times having bad infestations of spider mites on strawberries and on raspberries. But again, I haven't noticed that in recent years either.
Yeah, I remember, I remember about both the Japanese beetles and the squash bugs, but I feel like the squash bugs was the most apocalyptic scenario that I have ever seen.
It was pretty bad.
We had squash bugs that literally were just covered. And I think part of the reason why it seemed so apocalyptic was that we had the squash out in this field.
Yeah, and it was almost half an acre of squash.
We were growing for
So
market, yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of squash.
And the entire thing was crawling with squash bugs. Like literally, each leaf had like 5 to 10 squash bugs on it. I mean, this is just the picture that I remember in my mind going out there. And there was all of these, there was all these babies, and all right, I see it.
I think I've got it.
All right, here we go. Let me pull this up. Awesome. All right, we will drop backstage and we'll let you take it away.
So, yeah, I wanted to start this because, you know, the subject matter for this talk is companion planting, pest control through companion planting. And I wanted to let you know kind of how I was introduced to companion planting. And maybe you guys are starting at a place where I was starting. I had read a book or two on companion planting, maybe saw a video or something, tried some of the solutions that they offered, and I really didn't have any success. It didn't work. And so I moved on, smart enough not to fall for any of those old wives' tales anymore. A couple of years later, due to my YouTube channel, Next Level Gardening, I was approached by Penguin Random House to write a book for them. Now, first I thought it was a scam, but after I realized it wasn't, I started thinking about what I would write. I didn't have to do that. They already had a subject matter for me to write a book on. Companion planting. I was not excited about it. I'm like, I don't want to turn down this opportunity, but this didn't work for me. What am I going to write? They also told me it had to be 170 pages and I had 6 months to finish it. So I kind of spent the next 2 months of the 6 trying to find out as much information as I possibly could. I knew there was information out there. What I had tried failed miserably. So I kind of ended up falling down a rabbit hole into a world of information that I had never heard about. There was actual science and studies being done on companion planting, and there were universities and organic farms using these principles successfully. So I knew that I could write a book now based in fact and not fable, you know, kind of just passed down through generations. Now, I will say right up front, I'm not negating all garden information passed down from our ancestors. That's very valuable, but it's nice when you can see scientific studies to back up some of that. But I will tell you, just first off, planting basil next to your tomatoes is not going to make your tomatoes taste better. There's just no science to support that. But there are a lot of other benefits to companion planting, including today's topic, pest control. But before we go into that, we need to talk about what companion planting is. It's pretty basic. It's growing 2 or more different plants together to achieve mutual benefit, or at least on one benefiting from the other. Now, this could include growing different plants together for the benefit of shade, nutrients, protection from pests and disease, and attracting beneficial insects and pollinators.
Brian?
Yes.
Sorry to cut you off here. Just a quick little heads up. There's something moving around that's kind of causing static on your mic. I'm not sure exactly what it is.
Okay, let me try this. All right, does that sound better?
Yeah, perfect.
So humans have been companion planting for centuries. Some of it was done on purpose, and some of it was completely by accident. I think the most well-known example of historic companion planting would be the Three Sisters method. The Native Americans used this method of planting, and it was based on the 3 crops that were staples for them: grain corn, beans, and squashes. Now, the corn stalks gave the beans support to climb on. The large squash leaves would shade the ground to keep down leaves and hold in moisture. And then the beans would climb up the stalks, and then their root systems, they would fix nitrogen, which would benefit not only them, but the other 2 sisters of this planting method. So each of these plants provided a useful service to one of its neighbors. Now, in 14th century England, cottage gardens became popular. They were a little bit different than what we might think of today as, like in this picture, a very fairy tale, idyllic version of a garden. In the 14th century, cottage gardening was about survival. Front gardens of cottages were used to grow vegetables, fruits, and any flowers that they could kind of shove in there as a matter of necessity. Now, the byproduct of this type of gardening was that there were advantages that certain plants had growing next to other plants. And people took note of these things and then passed that information down through centuries. Now, fast forward to modern times, and science has started to explain and validate a lot of what has been passed down through generations. Unfortunately, though, it's also uncovered the fact that some of these things passed down through generations, they don't actually do what they have been said to do. Now, there are 6 principles of companion planting that we're going to cover, or that I cover in my book, Companion Planting for Beginners. Today, we're just going to cover a couple of them in detail. In its simplest form, companion planting is emulating nature. And the 6 principles are taken from how nature works in the wild without humans to come along and mess things up. So the first principle, and I'd say this is number 1 for a reason, is to avoid monoculture or monocropping. In nature, you look at this picture here, you don't see rows of any kind. You don't see huge expanses of any one type of plant surrounded by nothing else. Nature is diverse. And when you look at this forest here, at first, when you look at a forest from far away, you see pine trees or whatever the forest happens to be made up of. But the forest floor is covered in ferns and wild berries, asters, goldenrod, wild geranium, and so on. And all of those plants have a purpose in that forest. Companion planting follows this same principle and is about developing a diverse growing environment where plants and organisms work together in harmony. So when you look at most of today's farms, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see miles of a single crop in a field. This practice is called monoculture or monocropping, and it creates problems for pest control for sure, but also for soil nutrients. Monoculture is a beacon for pests that love this one type of crop, and they come in droves to an unlimited buffet. And so the answer to that is spraying a ton of pesticides. It's necessary, as is adding tons of synthetic fertilizers. What we're aiming for in our garden is diversity by growing different crops together, which is called polyculture or polycropping. Intermixing different types of crops confuses pests and makes it much harder for them to find their favorite plants. It means pests can't simply hop to the next plant in the row. They have to begin the search all over again for their favorite plant. Now, there are studies that show that the cabbage butterfly, for example, which is probably something any gardener is familiar with, they have to land on a certain number of brassica leaves in a row before they can lay eggs. Now, if you have a field of nothing but brassicas, every leaf this moth lands on is her favorite leaf, and she can lay egg after egg after egg. But if you mix it up, it disrupts the pattern of landing and egg laying, and it makes it much more difficult for them. So the first of these principles we're going to look at more in detail is monoculture and how it's done on a large scale and a small scale. Top picture, we already talked about miles of one crop, and we've talked about why that's problematic for growing food. The second picture probably more closely resembles a home garden. There's crop diversity, but there's still, perfectly wide rows of one type of plant. Now compare these two pictures to the scenario in my garden, which is on the right. There's a big difference. The first two pictures, even with a wide shot, you can kind of make out what's being grown there. But even in a close-up picture here of my garden, it takes a minute to see what's actually in the picture. In this one small space, we've got squash, peppers, flowers, spinach or chard, and even a sweet potato vine meandering its way through there. Now, for people who like orderly rows laid out in a perfectly spaced pattern, which I'll admit right now, that was me, and I still fight that urge. This right-hand side picture may seem a little chaotic, and it kind of is, but that's nature. Because of this visual chaos, there's order in the way the plants relate to one another, and the way the plants relate to the soil, and the way beneficial insects in this environment relate to their prey. All of that perfect order exists into, what our eyes perceive as chaos. There's perfect order there from a natural perspective. Now, to illustrate how plants can benefit from polyculture, let's consider the fate of the cabbage white butterfly. The perk of being this species is they can fly. I've always wanted that power. So they can fly, but the downside is they'll only live for a week or two. And within that short lifespan, there's a lot of work to be done. So it's a nice spring day. They're fluttering down a country road when they round the corner and they find a farm with 3 acres of nothing but cabbages. They've just hit the mother lode. There's no way they can lay eggs on every cabbage, but they're sure going to try. It doesn't really matter, though, because the next day or so, the farmer's going to come by and spray everything with pesticides, killing the eggs and probably the cabbage white butterfly, too. In the next scenario, the butterfly flutters into a backyard garden of someone who's gardening organically. They have several neatly laid out rows of crops, including 3 rows of favorites, cabbage, broccoli, and cauliflower. Now, our butterfly swoops in to lay their eggs, and because this is an organic garden, the eggs have a better chance of hatching in about a week. But that's when a vigilant organic gardener will begin to see the damage from these baby caterpillars eating the leaves. So they might spray the leaves with an organic pesticide or choose to handpick the worms off of the leaves. Either way, it's a lot of work for the gardener. In the third scenario, the butterfly is flying around and they come to my garden. They look around, they're a bit confused. They see something that looks like a cabbage, but it's surrounded by all kinds of other plants. They might find a leaf here, a leaf there, but it's a lot more work to do the egg laying. Not to mention, there are carrots and parsley blooming in the garden, which have attracted parasitic wasps. So even if the eggs hatch, the caterpillars will be parasitized and killed. I also have zinnias and sunflowers growing in my garden, and they attract robber flies, which are stealthy butterfly hunters. So my garden likely will be the last one that this butterfly lays its eggs in. All of this happens because I set it up like that. I've used polyculture to create a diverse growing environment where it's difficult for pests to take hold. So create diversity is the number one rule, the number one piece of advice that I can give when starting this next year's garden. In some ways, it doesn't matter what you plant next to your squash, tomatoes, and peppers, as long as you plant something besides squash, tomatoes, and peppers. Of course, there are plants that will help deter specific pests and also attract specific beneficial insects. But the main thing is it's important to mix things up. So now let's get into what probably 90% of you are here for at this specific talk. And I know that because it's the number one question I get. What do I plant with this plant or that plant to keep this pest from eating that crop? Now, what I won't be covering is which plant likes which plant. That's been kind of an overarching theme in companion planting for decades. There aren't really plants that like or hate growing next to others, except in a small handful of scenarios. It always conjures up images to me of, plants holding hands or stems when nobody's looking, of course, or one plant reaching over and smacking the other one. One thing we will talk about is what not to plant next to what. And we don't spend much time on that just because there aren't that many. Definitely not as many as some of the information that's been passed down through the years would suggest, which should make us very happy. There are very few plants that, they don't get along with their neighbor. So it gives us a little more freedom and a little less worry. Most of the plants, the issues we have to deal with are in the nightshade family: tomatoes, peppers, potatoes, and eggplant. With tomatoes and peppers being the most problematic. And that's because they're all in the same family. They all share the same diseases. Now, generally, at least in my area, potatoes come first, followed by tomatoes. And a lot of times those seasons overlap. But potatoes are more susceptible to getting disease. And because they come first, it's very easy for them to pass it on to tomatoes. And so you want to make sure that you keep, especially your tomatoes and potatoes, about 15 feet apart to minimize any of those problems. Another thing that nightshades have a problem with are black walnut trees. Black walnut trees secrete juglone. It's a substance in their root system that can either diminish the growth of nightshades or kill them completely. So you just want to keep your nightshades away from the drip line of any black walnut tree that you might have on your property. But now let's get to my favorite part of the whole subject. How can we partner the right companions with the right crops to make our lives easier in terms of pest control? I'm going to start with broccoli. It's always the first crop to get hit in my garden every year with aphids. And that's coming up soon, that season. At least for me, it's coming up very soon. Some of you in colder climates pushing a little bit, but it's probably going to be one of your first problems as well. Now, in my earlier garden days, I would run out and spray off the plants real hard with a hose that would drown a good amount of them. But in a few days, their numbers would increase again, and they would appear on the cauliflower and then on the cabbage. And I always wondered how it happened so quickly. I thought a little neem oil might fix the problem, just knock them out. So I'd bring out the sprayer, fill it with water, fill it with neem oil, spray everything in sight, because as fast as those aphids appear on one plant, then the next one, it's only a matter of time before they're going to cover everything in my garden. So I'm just going to spray everything and get ahead of it. If I'd spot a few holes in the cabbage leaves from the wonderful cabbage worm, I'd come back out with a sprayer of BT, spray everything in sight. And this is just a familiar scenario probably for a lot of you. In my garden, it was a yearly occurrence. It was like clockwork. And what I didn't realize was those first few sprayings of neem oil and BT, they kind of set up a domino effect that lasted throughout the year. A vicious cycle that never stopped. And so while I was working on the book, I decided to put these things to the test. It was spring when I was working on this. And I decided that when I sowed my brassica seeds, I was going to sow some alyssum, some dill, and some fennel. And I sowed them in the beds at the same time. A few weeks later, things are coming up. And to my dismay, here were the aphids again, and the cabbage worms a little bit later. But this time I held off. I didn't take action, no sprays, and it was killing me. And then one morning, I saw a few ladybugs on the dill leaves and lots of hoverflies floating over the alyssum. They were nowhere near the aphids, but they were there. Then a few days later, there were ladybug larvae and hoverfly larvae eating the aphids on my brassicas. I literally could see this happening. Now, ladybug larvae can eat up to 250 aphids per day, just one. And hoverfly larvae will eat aphids as well as the cabbage worms themselves. I still had to pick a few worms off of the plant, some of the bigger ones, but I never had to return to spraying neem oil or BT. And it was in that moment that I was convinced that attracting predators to your garden through companion planting was the optimum way to tackle pest insects. When I was indiscriminately spraying these pesticides, even if they were organic or considered organic, I was accidentally killing the larvae of the insects that were there to help me. I'm not saying it was smooth sailing for the rest of the year, but after a few seasons, I built that ecosystem in my garden through companion planting, and I no longer had to resort to sprays, except on very rare occasions where I might have like an overnight infestation of spider mites. But other than that, I haven't sprayed in about 4 years now. Now, it all begins with planting the right companions at the right times to attract the right predators to prey on the right pests on the right plants. Does that sound complicated? It really isn't. Let's tackle timing. A good rule of thumb is if you're sowing seeds of your main crop, you should sow the seeds of companion plants right along the same time. If you're putting in transplants, both the crop and the companion plant should be around the same size. You should monitor your garden though, because in different climates, in different areas, we have different pests. And so there are certain timings that might be different. So it's always important to keep notes of your garden. You want the companion plants to be blooming when your plants start to get to the age of starting to set fruit. So just keep track of that, and then you'll know after the first year or two exactly when this should happen. And you can probably keep notes in the Seed Time app as well. So I'd like to take you through some of the best plants to bring in the best beneficial insects to control some of the worst garden pests that most of us are pretty familiar with. So we'll talk about some of the most common pests we all deal with, what plants they typically attack, and what plants we can partner with those crops to bring in the troops to help manage those pests. So we're going to start with aphids. We already touched on them a bit, but I can give you a little more detail. And I like talking about aphids because they offer us a great example of how companion planting can hit pests with a three-prong approach: repelling, trap crops, and predators. So in the case of aphids, alliums like onions, chives, and garlic are known to have a bit of a repellent effect with aphids. But I will be honest with you and tell you that it isn't always the case. In fact, last year, my chives were the only thing in the whole garden that had aphids on them. But I've had it be the other way around as well, where the allium crops were the only ones not effective. Fortunately, we have two other methods that are more reliable. Trap crops are really a great way of controlling aphids. And a trap crop is just a type of plant that you add to the garden that you know you will not harvest. It's there to just be covered with insects and pests, a sacrifice plant, if you will. So if you plant these nasturtiums in the vicinity of your main crop that is usually infested with aphids, the aphids are going to see the nasturtiums, and because that's their favorite, they'll get all over it, and for the most part, leave your main crop alone. The third option, or the third prong in this approach, is predators, like ladybugs. I think we all knew that ladybugs eat aphids. Ladybugs live for 6 to 8 weeks, and in that short time, they will lay up to 1,000 eggs and eat as many as 5,000 aphids. Now, I'm not sure who's patient enough to do the counting in that study, but we're lucky to have those people. And they don't stop at aphids. Ladybugs eat many other garden pests as well, including beetle larvae, mealybugs, spider mites, and whitefly. And it might be tempting to purchase ladybugs at the checkout line at the big box store. They're all there. You know, they look like you just bring them home and they're going to take care of your problem. But don't do that. Almost all ladybugs sold in the United States are actually wild harvested, which means you have no idea where they came from. Up to 15% of these harvested ladybugs can carry parasites and diseases that will infect the native ladybugs in your area. What's more, you typically won't be able to keep store-bought ladybugs around long enough to do any good work unless you put like some fleece or a floating row cover over the crops to hold them in. But even then, there's really no guarantee. Instead, you should attract ladybugs to your garden using companion planting. It's super easy. Around your crops that are most susceptible to aphids, plant chives, cilantro, fennel, thyme, and yarrow. Those are some of ladybug's best plants, and before long, you're going to notice them in your garden. Now back to our friend the cabbage worm. We talked earlier about having a good mix of plants with your brassicas can confuse the cabbage butterfly and decrease the amount of eggs that are laid. Now, you can go through your garden and pick them off every day. It's a lot of work, and invariably, you're going to miss some. It's much easier to employ parasitic wasps to take care of them for us. It isn't the adult wasp that kills the worms. It's the babies. Parasitic wasps will find a cabbage worm, and this works on any type of caterpillar pest, but they'll find the worm, and they actually have the ability to pierce the skin of that worm and lay their eggs inside of it, where they will hatch, and the baby wasps will actually eat the worm from the inside out. It's pretty harsh, but it works. Now, you can attract these wasps to your garden by interplanting your brassicas with sweet alyssum. And you don't have to worry about getting stung. These are very docile wasps, and they're much, much smaller than the typical wasps that, we fear in the garden and we see flying around all the time. Now, I know a lot of you have been waiting for this one. If there was only something we could do about squash bugs and squash vine borer. Well, there is. Now, of course, nothing is 100% foolproof, but it is enough that larger regenerative farms are using these methods to mitigate the damage from these two pests. So we'll talk about squash bugs first. They can be found on all members of the cucurbit family, so squash, melons, cucumbers. The damage they create will show up as yellow spots that turn brown, and later the entire leaf will crisp up and die completely. Their activity can kill smaller plants, and they also eat the fruit. Now, you can attract a natural enemy of squash bugs, the tachnid fly, by planting dill and parsley and letting them go to flower. Now, it's important to just make a note of the things that need to flower to bring in the some of these predators. Now, some things flower, that's their main job to flower, marigold, for example. Other things like flowering carrot, when a carrot goes to flower, it brings in a lot of great beneficial insects, but carrots take longer to flower. So you have to remember when you're planting a carrot, if you're looking for the flowers, it's going to be a little bit later in the season. So just keep a mental note of that. Squash vine borers are probably even more frustrating because they're more stealthy. The adult squash vine borer is a moth that looks like this, kind of looks like a wasp. So keep your eye out for them, because if you see them, you're going to need to look for their eggs ASAP. You'll usually find them on the main stem, but they can also be elsewhere on the plant. And when those eggs hatch, the larvae burrow into the stem of the plant, and they basically eat the stem from the inside out. And as they do that, it makes it less and less possible for the plant to draw nutrients and water from the soil until the point where it just can't do it anymore. Most of the stem is eaten. The whole plant is going to just wither and die. Once it reaches that stage, there's not a lot you can do to save the plant. So prevention is key, and there are methods of prevention that aren't in our scope of this talk today. But one method is to make sure we have those parasitic wasps in the garden, because just like with caterpillars, parasitic wasps lay their eggs inside of other eggs, and they can kill the actual larva if they can get to it, which a lot of times with squash vine borer, it's already in the plant. Planting sweet alyssum, dill, and fennel and letting them flower will attract the wasps to the area. And so they're going to keep a better eye out for eggs than you ever could. Another approach to the squash vine borer and squash bug is trap cropping. This works for both of those, and it's their favorite squash above all others is the blue Hubbard squash. I don't know why, but it's been scientifically proven. You can plant blue Hubbard squash about 15 feet away from your main squash or melon crop that you want to harvest. And these two pests are going to be drawn away from those crops you want over to the blue Hubbard squash. And one blue Hubbard squash plant can protect about a half a dozen main crop plants. So using both approaches is useful. Make sure you attract the wasps to the area so they can hunt in the blue Hubbard squash as well. Now, if you have tiny holes in your tomato, potato, eggplant, and pepper plants, flea beetles are probably the cause. They're tiny black beetles, as you see here. They look and hop like regular fleas you might find on a dog. They attack members of the nightshade family and also damage crops like corn and brassicas. Usually the damage is on the newer leaves on the plants. They also damage seedlings and transplants in their early stages. Now you can thwart this pest by planting a trap crop of radishes. Again, a trap crop is a sacrificial plant that you're not going to harvest. You can also use pak choi as well for this, but you're going to plant these a little bit differently than the blue Hubbard squash that you planted for your other squash plants. The blue Hubbard you put 15 feet away. And that's because those other two bugs we're protecting, they travel. Flea beetles don't travel very far. And so you want to make sure that your trap crops of radish or pak choi are right there in the vicinity, less than 3 feet away from the crop you're trying to protect. Spider mites. They are really tiny pests. They live in large groups on the undersides of leaves, and the early damage looks like this leaf here, thousands of yellow spots. If infested, entire leaves can take on this bronze appearance. You may also notice a very fine webbing throughout the plant. Companion planting any kind of bushy plant will attract big-eyed bugs. Now, I think the laziest, least creative scientist in the world created that name for these bugs, but whatever it is, these one-eyed bugs can eat close to 50 spider mites per day. And they just want shelter in bushy plants. So this could be other vegetables. This could be herb plants like lavender or thyme, rosemary, just a place for them to shelter fairly near plants that you're getting an infestation of spider mites on. If you walk past your plants and a white cloud flies out when you hit it, you probably have whitefly. These are tiny little flying insects that float into the air. They might leave cottony beards hanging from the underside of leaves if you have a really bad infestation. Whiteflies suck the juices from your plant leaves, causing them to yellow and die, and they prey on a wide variety of plants. Now, damsel bugs, like this one here in the picture, are the natural predator of whitefly, and you can attract them to your garden by planting lavender and low-growing thyme. They like to take shelter close to the ground, so any really low-growing bushy plant are going to provide this for them. Sweet alyssum, marigolds, all of these things are low-growing and bushy, which the big-eyed bugs love. Now, I'm sorry, the damsel bugs. Now, damsel bugs have a beak that they use to first pierce the body of their prey, and then they insert a straw-like apparatus that sucks the juices, the innards, out of the pests. Again, it's not pretty, but it is very effective. The last one we're going to talk about is something that is familiar to probably anybody who's ever grown tomatoes for sure, but these tomato hornworms can infest any of the nightshade family plants. Usually tomatoes. I've had them on my peppers, and I've had them on eggplant as well. But they're these chubby green worms, usually have a red horn on their back or a green horn. They're about 4 to 5 inches long. They can strip leaves off of a plant in a matter of days. You'll notice missing leaves. The early signs is missing leaves and dark green to black droppings right below where you see the area of the problem. Now, the best trick I have to share, it has nothing to do with companion planting, but if you get an ultraviolet black light flashlight, Amazon, they're pretty cheap. And this is great if you have kids. You go outside at night, they will glow in the dark. The plants don't glow in the dark. The tomato worms will. And that's always the problem, is finding those tomato worms because they blend in with the tomato leaves. But at night with a black light flashlight, they don't. However, that's not the scope of this talk. We are talking about companion planting. However, if you do companion plant, you're going to deprive your kids of that fun activity. But the spotted hawk moth, which is the full-grown version of the tomato hornworm, finds tomato plants by smell. And tomatoes, as we all know, the plants have a distinctive smell to them. And so to confuse that hawk moth, you want to plant something with your tomatoes that has a stronger smell than your tomato plants. My favorite is basil. Basil and tomatoes, they work well in the kitchen. They work even better in the garden. They're not going to make your tomatoes taste better, but they will keep the hornworms away. I plant a large row of basil right in front of my tomato plants every year. I've done this for years, and ever since I started doing that, I have not had tomato hornworm on my tomatoes. Now, there was one year when I did a display garden on the other side of our property. I had a raised bed. I had a tomato plant, pepper plant, totally forgot the basil. And guess what happened with both of those plants that year? They got tomato hornworm, while my regular tomato bed that had the basil planted next to it didn't have any. So I will never again forget that. I will always plant basil with my tomatoes. That's step one of the approach. Planting carrots, celery, dill, and fennel in your garden will attract those parasitic wasps, which we already talked about. They will take care of the worms by laying their eggs under the skin. And we talked about what happens after that. It will kill the worm and it will stop the life cycle. So that is my talk today. I hope you got something out of it. I think we're going to open it back up for question and answer here. So I'll just turn it back over to Paul and Edwin.
Thank you, Brian.
Oh, that was really great.
I especially love your black light thing. I did not know that.
Oh, it's so fun.
Neither.
It's so fun.
We're going to have to try that. Although, did we have tomato homers last year? We haven't had as much issues with them, but yeah. And like you said, if you're companion planting, then you deprive yourself of the fun of it. Of the black light.
That's right.
All right, we got some questions here. John, we'll start with this one. Thanks, Brian. How do I deal with fire ants?
I get this question in almost every presentation I do. And unfortunately, I don't have a good answer. I have not found any scientific evidence of any companion planting with ants. So I always go back to the old standby of borax or diatomaceous earth. I don't have any companion planting advice for you on that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. And we don't have any either. So we're in good company here. The one thing that I have done with fire ants that you might not want to do in the middle of your garden, because it would be bad for your soil, but it's kind of fun, is you can pour gasoline down them and light it.
Yeah, it would take care of the ants, but it'd probably take care of the rest of your garden as well.
Exactly. All right. Other questions here.
Susie says, what plants deter squash bugs?
So for squash bugs, basically we want to get the big-eyed bugs in there, and the best way to do that, like I mentioned, is bushy plants. Anything bushy. You know, outside of your vegetable garden, if you have room and you like flowers, setting up a whole border of just ornamental flowers, a perennial border, that is going to be a huge place where all of these good insects can not only live through the growing season, but if you leave those in place over the winter, it's a great place for them to overwinter and be back next year. So you want that. You want tachnid flies and parasitic wasps as well. And for those, you want to plant umbel flowers. Umbel flowers means when you look at a flower like a yarrow, for instance, it's one flower, kind of, but it's made up of like 1,000 flowers in the shape of an umbrella. Carrot flower, Queen Anne's lace, if you know what that is, dill, they have these umbrella looking flowers. So those are going to bring in the parasitic wasps, the tachnid flies, and all those together are going to help with that problem. But I really think for those squash bugs and squash vine borer, you got to hit them with as many things as possible. Now, I'm lucky here, we don't have those. So I don't even know your pain, but I've heard from thousands of viewers who do know your pain. So you want to hit them with that. So do the trap cropping with the blue Hubbard squash about 15 feet away. Those are the best companion planting answers I have.
Paul, you'll have to repeat that. Your mic was muted.
Oh, that was very embarrassing then. So you're waiting on me, and I was thinking we were waiting on you. All right. So Tina says, I'm thinking about planting beans beside my elderberry bushes. Is there something that I should add to that mix? Any suggestions for companion planting next to elderberries?
So elderberries, I don't know how much, I have never grown those. Again, it's all about biodiversity, as many different kinds of plants as you can. I can tell you for the beans, if you get the Mexican bean beetle, which is a issue we have here, you can grow potatoes next to your beans. Potatoes bring in a Colorado potato beetle. So those both have issues, and they are going to actually compete for each other. They're going to ward off both of those. So if you have them together, you're going to get rid of both of those problems. So the potato is going to help protect your beans. The beans are going to help protect your potatoes. So I always, when I plant my potatoes, I have a row of bush beans. I don't worry about the tall teepees. I just plant some bush beans intermixed with the potatoes, and that really helps a lot.
Good deal.
Very interesting. Annalise says, I'm trying to intercrop with companion plants, but how do you know how far apart to plant so they don't shade each other out in their adult size? I'm a first-time gardener, and it's tough to gauge how much space they need, and I only have a little backyard space, but I want to plant as much as I can without making it too dense so that it restricts airflow.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people worry about is, I have X amount of space for crops that I want to eat. I don't necessarily want to take up a lot of room with these other companion plants. So first of all, I will tell you that with companion planting and just adding that biodiversity, and especially if you get my book, I talk about how companion planting builds the soil. Between building the soil with companion planting and pest control, which we've been talking about today, you're actually going to be able to grow a much more abundant harvest out of a small space. So it's actually worth giving a little bit of room to companion plants, because the flip side is they're going to help take care of those plants both under the ground and above the ground, and you're going to end up getting more of a harvest from fewer vegetable plants than you would have with more vegetable plants, but not bringing in that biodiversity. Does that make sense? That was probably a long rambling thing, but
That's excellent.
spacing though, you want to just look at the seed packet or the little tag if you're getting transplants, and just treat the companion plant as you would any other vegetable plant that you're putting next to it. And also, if there's a height difference, so let's say you're planting marigolds next to something tall like tomatoes. Hopefully, you know kind of where the sun lands and where the sun's coming from in your garden. Just put those shorter marigold plants on the south side of your tomatoes so they don't get shadowed by the tomatoes. Otherwise, yeah, you will have a bit of an issue there.
Yeah.
And if you're using our Seed Time app, we have recommended spacing built in.
Yep.
You can change that if you want, but it's built into the app.
Gives you a little baseline you can work off of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Another question here from Melanie says, with polyculture, how do you keep mold or mildew from settling in? I love the idea and we'll do this in my garden, but I find it can hamper airflow. I mean, it's kind of tied with the same.
Similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you live in a damp climate, then you, like with just your other crops, you want to have airflow and you want to space them out a little bit more. You can space a companion plant to do good doesn't have to be touching the plant that it's helping. You know, you could plant 3 dill plants in your entire garden and it's going to cover a large amount of space. So just, you know, keep the spacing in mind. If you live in a damp climate, you probably want to spread things out a little bit. Than what I have here in a dry climate, I can cram them in a little bit more because we don't get a lot of those fungal issues.
Yeah. We get them here in Tennessee. We have the nice humid summers here. Belinda here says, what is BT? I've seen it mentioned a number of times, but have no idea what it is. Can you explain that to?
Yeah, it just stands for Bacillus thuringiensis. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but it's a bacteria that is not harmful to humans, but when it's eaten by any type of worm pest, caterpillar pest, when they're eating, if it's on the leaf, they eat the leaf, their digestive system can't process it. And so it ends up killing the worm, but it's completely harmless to humans, but also, you know, things like bees, butterflies. Unfortunately, what we found is that it does kill the larva stages of a lot of our beneficial insects. So I would only use it sparingly in targeted locations, and definitely don't do what I used to do, which is, you know, hit everything because you want to head it off at the pass.
Good. All right. Probably do 1 or 2 more questions here. A couple questions related to your book. Is there a planting schedule in your book?
I have schedules, and I also have, let's see, I'll show a picture. It'd be much more beneficial. So I have kind of illustrations of planting guides that show you what goes with what and where to plant them. So I have cool season, warm season, just different ones in there. So it's all labeled and it talks about exactly how to do that. And then in the back of the book, there is a section on all of the different types of plants and then the companion plants that go with that. And then it talks about how and when to plant them together.
That is so great.
Very nice.
And where again could people get that? There's people that are definitely interested.
Amazon, Target, Walmart, websites.
Everywhere.
Yeah, basically.
Love it. All right. Why don't we do one last question here? This one is from Get the Bees. The question is, doesn't fennel kill everything around it?
I haven't had that experience.
We haven't either, but we haven't done really a lot of companion planting with fennel, but
That might be one of those things that's passed down, but I've never experienced
Yes. Yeah, very good. Awesome. Well, there's more questions. Unfortunately, we are out of time to keep going through all of them, but can we refer people over to you if they have other questions, or really to get your book? Probably. It's probably most of the questions are probably answered in there. Yeah.
that. Yeah. Between the book and the channels, I think you'll have everything you need.
Fantastic. So definitely encourage everyone, go check out Brian's YouTube channel, check out his book. And thank you, Brian, again for jumping on with us. Do you have any last words or?
No, it's been great. I've enjoyed talking with you guys. I love your product. I just started using it this season, and yeah, it's the best I've seen.
Awesome. That's exciting to hear. Love it. Well, thanks again, and
thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, we'll look forward to next time.
All right, you guys have a good day.
You too.
You too.
We'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Wow, huge thank you to Brian for spending the time with us today. Has this been helpful for you? Let us know in the chat, and give Brian a hand in the chat. It's always exciting to connect and hear from someone that is an expert in the field. And so Brian's written the book on companion planting and does it in his garden. And man, take these tips and go use them in your garden.
And does the class on School of Traditional Skills.
He is the expert in School of Traditional Skills. So yeah, once again, a little plug for them. Go grab the discount, because you can go and watch his whole class in the School of Traditional Skills as well. If you want to take it to the next level, get a lot more content than we were just able to go over here right now. Yeah, can see a lot of excited people in the chat here. Just want to also give you a quick reminder that our mission here at Seed Time is to make gardening and farming easier for you. That's why we put on a free summit like this, so you can hear from all of these experts and take this information and go and implement it in your home gardens, in your homesteads, on your farms. And we also understand that this whole event is super jam-packed with 5 live sessions a day. It's kind of crazy. And so if for some reason you missed a session, we do have replays available for a limited amount of time. You can click the link up at the top of the page here, or we also have an opportunity that we've opened up for you to own the summit if you would like to purchase and get all of the replays all at once. And I'm going to just pull up a slide here and walk you through that quickly as well, just so that you have a clear understanding. Or if you're watching this as a replay later on, here is how you can grab those replays as well. We currently, during the summit, are offering a special with $100 off lifetime access to the whole Seed to Harvest Summit recordings. And here's what's included when you grab the summit recordings. That we have 2 packages available right now. We have a platinum package and a gold package. And inside, you'll get access to lifetime online access to the recordings of the entire summit. So all 21 presentations, the video presentations, but then we're going to also split those out and make them available in MP3 audio versions, so that you can take them, if you're an audio listener, you like to listen to podcasts, you want to listen to it in the car or out in the garden. Actually, it was probably the best place to go and listen to these while you're out gardening. We'll also split out the transcripts. So if you like to read more than you like to watch or listen, you'll be able to do that as well. And then for the fun of it, we are also going to be sharing the live chat logs. And there's a ton of great information that you all, because this event is not just an event of the experts sharing, but it's a community experience where all of you are interacting with each other in the chat, and that is a lot of fun as well. And then at the platinum level here, we're going to also take all of this and put it together on a physical flash drive. So the recordings, the transcripts, the MP3s, the chat logs, and ship it straight to your door. So if you like to have something physical in your hand, this is the way to go. In addition to that, we've been talking about and mentioned Seed Time multiple times. Seed Time is the garden planner that we have developed that makes it extremely easy to know what to do and when to do it in your garden. And during the summit, we want to not only give you expert training and insights, but also give you a tool that makes it a lot easier to put it into practice and to not be struggling with the guesswork of trying to figure out what to do and when to do it in your garden. And so with both Summit packages, we are going to be giving you 1 year of free upgraded level access to Seed Time with extra bells and whistles. And so what happens with Seed Time is you get a calendar based on your location. It automatically pulls your average frost dates. You can then click the green Add Crop button up at the top right-hand side of the screen. You can choose the crop you want to grow. It will automatically give you recommended, suggested timings of when to grow crops. And you can schedule them into your calendar, and it will tell you when to seed it, when to transplant it, expected harvest times. You can drop those into your calendar, and then it's completely adjustable. You can add succession plantings easily. You can add plantings in the fall. It'll give you suggested timings for the fall and the spring. You can put plantings through the summer, even straight through the winter. Then once you have your calendar set up, you can lay out your garden visually, and you can take those plants and place them where they're going to grow in your garden based on the time that they would actually be taking up space in your garden. So it gives you a way to track both time and space. Watch the little green slider here and the crops down in the beds below. You'll notice as the green slider moves forward, you can see the crops coming in and out, and it gives you a easy visual way to walk through your entire season and see, hey, when are different spaces in my garden going to be used, and when do I have gaps? Could I be adding another crop in? Could I be growing a cover crop in that space? Helps you really maximize your space in your garden. And ultimately, what that ends up doing is helps you maximize your yield, because you're able to set up a continual harvest of fresh food through your entire season that you can replace the grocery store and be harvesting off of all year long. In addition to that, you'll have the task list that easily keeps you on track. It automatically compiles from your calendar. You can come in on a daily or weekly basis, check off those tasks, and adjust your plantings on the fly. There's the journal that makes it easy to keep your notes and observations, keep those pictures, link them to plantings, come search, filter them. Just a one place to easily keep organized in your garden. And then there is a classroom and a community and a store. And there's just so much that you get when you jump in with your 1 year of free upgraded level access in Seed Time. In fact, you even get 20% off all of your seed orders in the Seed Time store as well. In addition to Seed Time, you will also, at the platinum level, we have a few extra little bonuses for you. The first one here is 1 year of free bonus online access to our flagship home gardening course. This is $120 value and includes 12 modules, over 18 hours of more in-depth video training with worksheets and teaching and demonstration videos, walking you through how to keep your garden weed-free without spending hours on your knees with a butter knife, how to deal with pests and diseases in a natural and organic way, how to build healthy soil, how to extend your season without breaking your pocketbook. There's a lot in this home gardening course, and we're actually planning on redoing the home gardening course this year. So you'll probably get access to those new videos as well as we roll those ones out. And then in addition to those two bonuses, we have two more here at the platinum level. One is bonus sponsor session recordings. These are recordings that we have some sponsors that are not going to be aired during the main portion of this summit, but you'll get access to their bonus sponsor sessions. One is the microbiometer. Healthy soil is alive and microbially rich, and they go into talking about those microbes, as well as a very simple little tool that you can use to test the microbial life in your soil. Kind of fun. How much bacteria, how much fungal colonies do I have? Really neat little gadget there. And then also Diego from Modern Grower has a whole session on season extension, how to use tunnels and covers, and it's going to walk you through simple practical strategies of how to extend your season in your garden. And then in addition to that, you will also get bonus exclusive unaired garden trainings. These are a $50 value. These are additional trainings that are not going to be aired at all during the entire summit promotional window. In fact, the only place that you can find these is in the platinum package of Seed Time. And a couple examples of these are Michael Kilpatrick, a friend of ours, By the way, we filled up all of our speaker slots, and then we had extra speakers that were like, yeah, actually, it would be really great for you to do something too. And so they agreed to come in and do some of these bonus unaired sponsor slots. So Michael Kilpatrick walks through growing ginger and turmeric. So if you're interested in that at all, this is the session to attend, because it will, he walks through the process of growing them. And then my friend James Fry does a Revolution garden bed, and he shows how this is a regular garden bed on the left-hand side, Revolution on the right, and side by side you can see the Revolution garden bed growing food 2 times faster. It's kind of wild. He has a time lapse showing them grow at the same time, and it's just crazy how big his produce gets, and he walks through why it does what it does. And how the microbes interact with the plants and grow the food so much faster. So you may be wondering, how can I grab my hands on one of these packages and own the summit for life? The platinum package at full price is $298, but during the summit, you can get $100 off for just one payment of $198 to get lifetime access at the platinum level, with the extra bonuses of free unlimited level access to seed time for 1 year, free bonus access to the home gardening course, the bonus sponsor sessions, and the exclusive unaired garden trainings. And then the gold package at full price is $198. But once again, you can get $100 off during the summit for just for payment of $98. And that comes with all online access to the summit and 1 year of free basic level access to the Seed Time Garden Planner. So if you are ready to get started, our team has pinned a link up at the top of the chat, or you can go to seedtoharvestsummit.com/lifetime, and you can grab your summit package before the price goes up. We also are backing it up with our 30-day money-back guarantee. So either Seed Time makes it so much easier to plan your garden, and the summit adds so much value to your life, or give us an email, send us an email within the first 30 days, and we've got your back 100%. Now is the time, my friends, to take your garden to the skies. The world is kind of going crazy right now, and now's the time to get out into the soil and to grow some food. We want to bring back victory gardens, bring back everyone growing something for their own family. And we want you to come away with an amazing experience this year in your garden, like Linda here, who says, I've never had such great vegetables. Or like Scott, who said, by far our best garden ever. Or Anne, who said, my crazy garden has been amazing this year and grew in size and abundance. So much produce. There's a very noticeable difference amount of fruitage this year compared to last year. And then CJ, who was using Seed Time, and said, I now have a clear plan of what to do and when. Kim said, my fall and winter garden last year was the best ever because the guesswork of when to plant was simplified and so easy. And, as we did the pre-summit survey, one of the top thing that many of you said was the main thing that you struggle with in your garden was figuring out what to do and when to do it. And Seed Time is one of the easiest tools that we know of that helps take away that stress and overwhelm and make it a lot easier to plan and grow your garden without guesswork. So definitely jump on over, check them out, check out all the details at seedtoharvestsummit.com/lifetime. And look forward to getting the summit recordings in your hand. Let's see. Susan is saying, Sean, how do we get the free Seed Time account? And I think Sean has posted a link in the chat there. Probably I saw someone else posting a link as well, potentially.
There's a link pinned up at the top. No, that's
to grab lifetime access to the recordings. Or you can just go to seedtime.us, our main website, and grab your free Seed Time account there. Yes, Seed Time does have multiple levels. There is a free level of Seed Time that literally any one of you, all of you, can go grab your free Seed Time account and start using it right away. And then there's some extra bells and whistles that you will get when you get the recording packages that give you the upgraded access as well. Part of that is the layout and being able to lay out your garden, which is pretty cool. All right. I don't think I see any other questions here for right now. We do need to wrap up this session, have a short break before coming back, excuse me, to our next session.
Linda says she bought the Platinum, but she doesn't know how to access it.
Good question, Linda. Feel free to email support@seedtime.us. We are here to help you and make sure that you get access to it. That being said, Linda, there isn't a lot in there yet because this summit is live, right? And so we're gathering and taking all of the recordings from the summit. We're going to be moving them, putting them into the Platinum package there for you very soon. But if you have any trouble accessing, you can log into the members area and you can go see the page for the Platinum. But just send us an email and we'll help you do that. All right, coming up next on the hour is going to be Jill Reagan with Sustainable Solutions for a Thriving Garden and Organic Pest Control. So looking forward to that. Jill is a great friend and farmer and homesteader, and you're not going to want to miss her session coming up soon. All right, we'll sign off for now and we'll see you next time.
See you then.